Welcome in this episode of the FHS Egypt podcast. We are joined by wonderful Nina Vitlani, Managing Director, MENA at Sectorlight. Following her participation at FHS Saudi Arabia, we discuss how Egypt can build distinctive destinations, connect with local and international audiences, and turn its culture, geography, and lifestyle into long-term value for hospitality and real estate developments. Welcome, Nina.
Thank you, Dario, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, having worked across major regional destinations, what makes Egypt particularly exciting from that place branding perspective today?
Okay, and that's a good question. So we've been spending a lot of time in Egypt recently, working on various projects, and I would say that Egypt is one of those rare destinations that always has, already has something very extraordinary, and it's already globally recognised. So most countries spend decades actually building that awareness, whereas Egypt starts with that incredible advantage through the history, the culture, and the geography in terms of location. So what's exciting today is that that conversation is evolving. So Egypt is no longer only about, the ancient history and the leisure tourism. We're seeing that emergence of real world class mixed use destinations, luxury hospitality, lots of branded residences, and then lifestyle led developments. That are really creating that differentiator, and actually people want to visit for more than just the history and the leisure, but more to invest and live. And I think the opportunity now is to complement the heritage with the contemporary narrative, and it has the potential really to become an all year round destination that competes internationally. So I think it's a very exciting time, and that sort of brand placing perspective, place branding perspective, is it's yet to sort of fully evolve, but they already have so much going.
Yeah, well, that's true, and they've got all those different areas that they're developing. Just before we jumped on live here, we talked about North Coast, particularly Cairo, lots of developments there. Red Sea, that's a little bit more well established, and they all offer very different experiences. How do you think should each of those destinations define its own identity to differentiate between each other as well?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the key is the destination itself, right? So every successful destination needs to have a clear point of view rather than trying to sort of appeal to everyone. So Cairo is about culture, creativity, connectivity, business, urban energy. Like that's kind of where New Cairo, especially like having spent more time there, I really enjoy that urban energy that it has. And then the North Coast, I think that has the potential to become really a primary lifestyle destination with some of the projects that we see coming up. I mean, Namos just launched, last week there, and it really is positioned as kind of that all year round. It can be positioned as that all year round destination through the hospitality, the wellness, the entertainment, and that connectivity as well. When the infrastructure is there. Today they're obviously very reliant on domestic and GCC market, but I think there is huge potential for moving that into international, and all the projects that we're working on up on the North Coast are ultimately going to be targeted to those international audiences. The Red Sea, obviously, as you said, that's quite an established destination already, and I think they should continue to position. It should continue to position itself around like the nature, the marine experiences, and a little bit more on the luxury and the wellness side. So actually, like those two destinations, the North Coast and the Red Sea, they don't, rather than competing with each other, these destinations should actually complement one another and actually give visitors different reasons to experience different parts of Egypt throughout the year.
If we zoom in and actually look at the needs and aspirations of the visitors of all those different destinations, how do they differ across all of those?
Yes, I think buyers are becoming increasingly like they're not purchasing a property anymore. It's not about
Mm,
owning an apartment. It's about purchasing a lifestyle that they want to be a part of. Domestic buyers obviously will often prioritize like family and familiarity and long-term
mm,
investment. So a lot of the domestic Egyptian buyers, it's very common. Most of them have a second home up on the north coast, for example. So that's very, very common within Egypt. And I think, the Egyptians would rather invest, it's part of their culture, they would rather invest in property than keep the money in the bank.
mhm,
And obviously the volatility of the pound, that also is a compounded effect. It contributes
mm,
to that. But then regional buyers are looking for accessibility. They're looking for like standards of hospitality, and they're looking for confidence in investment. So for international buyers that want that authenticity, they're looking to buy to invest in trusted brands and clearly kind of having that confidence to invest in that environment. So this is where branded residences become increasingly valuable because they
mm,
reduce the perceived risk and then
mhm.
elevate the overall customer experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, talking about regional, local audiences as well, we've got now international audience looking into the market quite heavily as well. And how do you think, and how can Egyptian developments appeal to all this unique, different groups or set of groups without diluting its proposition?
Well, I think speaking of sort of brand strategy and proposition, one of
Mm,
the biggest sort of misconceptions is that you need to have a different proposition for every audience. And often we
mm,
get developers coming to us saying, "Okay, what's going to be our proposition for this audience?" And we
mm,
don't. I mean, what we need, what we always educate our clients on is that we need one authentic proposition and different ways of telling that story to the different audiences. So local buyers may connect through community. That a lot of them will have friends that are also investing in those destinations, and they'll go there with their families. GCC buyers, as I said, will be more on the accessibility second home ownership side, so somewhere to get away and kind of relax and unwind. And I think again, like speaking of like the north coast, I think there's that's actually a really prime location in terms of the climate and everything else. And then international investors, they will want, long-term value, and they will want kind of to feel that they have the confidence to invest through, through globally recognized hospitality brands.
mm.
In core, like authenticity is the key, and maintaining that core identity of the destination, and then telling the story in different ways to different audiences, is our recommendation on how to without how to not dilute the proposition.
Yeah. So my next question, I guess, sort of feeds into this discussion as well. From a large mixed-use development perspective, how do you then create this one clear identity while giving each of the components like hotel or residences or retail component its own role?
Yeah, so I guess kind of on off the back of what I was just saying, we always encourage clients to think destination first rather than development first. And I think the destination should have like one overarching promise, one personality, like one emotional story as a destination. And then any hotels, residences, retail, entertainment, anything that falls under that becomes different expressions of that story. Too often projects are marketed individually, and we're seeing that with a lot of developments in the Middle East that we're working on, where the overall sort of placemaking strategy hasn't
Mm,
come into play, and it's each developer is working in different silos, and those developments have not been as successful. So when everything works together and there's a strong placemaking strategy, you create a stronger recognition, and then ultimately a greater sort of long-term value because buyers are investing in the destination, not just simply purchasing an apartment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, you mentioned Middle East and some of the developments here. We're both based in Dubai. So, what do you think Egypt can learn from that sort of scale and ambition of the Middle Eastern developments, but what they should really approach differently as well?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of learning. So, the Middle East has obviously demonstrated what is possible in terms of like long-term vision and infrastructure, and how that comes together with branding, and how that is successful. But one important lesson, I think, is creating destinations rather than developments, which I keep saying. And another is the value of that internationally recognized brand, in building that investor confidence and supporting that premium pricing that branded residences would, would deliver. And Egypt should, in my opinion, should not try to replicate what the GCC has done.
Mm,
The competitive advantage for Egypt really is like the authenticity. So, where I think Egypt has the greatest opportunity is to position itself as a contemporary lifestyle destination, that happens to have one of the richest cultural histories in the world, rather than just
mhm.
heritage destination.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, with Egypt's heritage as well and culture, it's such a rich story there, right? How would you say developers can use that, but without sort of relying too much on cliches and not doing it too gimmicky that you can see in certain destinations. I won't name them.
Yeah, we're still seeing it quite a lot, aren't we? Those cliches. So, I mean, my view is that heritage should inspire design rather than define it. So, today's traveler, they don't necessarily want like obvious historical references. They want authenticity expressed through, things like architecture and food and music and local experiences. And Egypt has an incredibly rich cultural DNA, and the opportunity really is to express that through contemporary design and hospitality. So yeah, I think it's finding the balance, isn't it, without the cliche, but keeping heritage as an inspiration point for design and experience.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's maybe go into the work that you do and Sector Light specifically. You often describe brand experience as more than marketing, right? So,
Mhm.
what should that experience look like across the customer journey?
Yeah, so I mean, we believe that branding starts long before someone arrives, right? So it begins really with the destination and how the development is positioned, and it continues through every single touch point. So whether that's that first sort of digital interaction when someone's, researching, investment opportunities, or the brochure, or the sales presentation, or the sales gallery, and then all the
Mhm.
sort of digital experiences, all the way through to like the entire sort of customer journey of handover, and that experience as well. So every interaction either reinforces that promise or it weakens it. So consistency really for us, like our recommendation would always be to have consistency in the experience across every touch point. And we like to get involved quite early. Often we get involved later when the project, development team will present to us and say, this is what our vision is for the project. But actually, there's a few projects that have been very successful where we've been involved much earlier in the master planning phase as well. Because branding really, it should start there and not be something that's added on later
Yeah,
on. Yeah.
yeah. Any perhaps project you're particularly proud of, or where that whole journey has sort of developed into something really exciting that you can uh, talk through?
Yeah, yeah. So I think one of the recent launches that we had was the Four Seasons residences on Sadia Island in Abu Dhabi. And it was basically the last plot of land on that prime Sadia beach. I've lived in the
Mm,
Middle East for 20 years, and that for me, Sadia Beach is like the nicest
mhm.
beach, nice white powdery sand.
Yeah.
And it's a lovely, kilometers of clean beach. So
Yeah.
this was the last plot, and we got involved. We've been working with Elaine Holding, across various projects over the years, and they got us involved quite early. And we worked really, really closely with the developer and the brand, to really
Mhm.
define a clear proposition. And our proposition was rooted around sort of the nature, and the harmony of hearing those waves and being able to sort of walk along the beach and live that life. And we created a beautiful campaign, a film which had music composed by an orchestra. Our vision was to have an orchestra performing on that Saadiyat beach, so we recorded that, and that became our film. And potential buyers could really feel that symphony of music and sounds and experience on the Saadiyat beach.
Fascinating. Yeah, you were describing it, and I was transported in that space. So I imagine it's pretty special. I guess sort of connected to that as well. In my next question, wellness.
Mhm.
It's sort of now become such a standard in just luxury property. How do you think Egypt use its sort of climate, coastline, and all the natural assets to create something more distinctive in that wellness space?
Yeah, wellness is a real buzzword at the moment, isn't it? And every project is speaking about that, they're going down that wellness route. So how do we really differentiate other projects from it? So wellness, I think it's becoming less about the facilities, the spa and all the physical facilities, and more about the lifestyle. And
Yeah,
this young generation of buyer, extremely, health conscious. And Egypt has a genuine competitive advantage through the climate that they
yeah,
have, that beautiful coastline, and then they've got the desert landscape, and then year-round sort of outdoor living as well. So rather than simply adding another spa, I feel that developers should design destinations where wellness is embedded into that everyday life through, because of the climate there. I think walkability and nature and outdoor experiences, that community living, and then things like healthy dining as well. I think wellness really should consider all of those things rather than just another spa. And those experiences, people increasingly seek, and they remember the actual experience rather than a physical service.
no, absolutely, absolutely. Well, we've gone through quite a few questions as well. Is there, before we wrap up, is there anything that we haven't covered, perhaps that does excite you, or in some of the work and the recent projects that you do that you thought would be interesting for the audience and get a little bit more insights into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only other bit that we sort of haven't spoke about is the pace at which development is happening in Egypt. And as I said, we're working across a number of projects, mostly branded residences, but a couple of non-branded projects as well. And we're kind of used to the Middle East way of working, where everything
Mhm.
is pretty last minute, and we need to launch in 2 months or 3 months. But like with Egypt, it's literally, we need to launch in 3 weeks or 4 weeks rather than months. So yeah, I think we're also learning a lot in trying to, refine our processes to make sure that we can support developers and brands to get to market much quicker. But yeah, I think it's, as I said, it's really exciting times, and I think the other thing, there does need to be a bit more education really in selling these sort of super premium projects, because I think branded residences are still very new to Egypt, and we are seeing that there's a gap there where sales teams need to kind of up their sort of level a little bit in terms of actually being able to um, sell and target. I mean, I think it's fine with local audiences and probably the GCC audience because they've always been used to selling to those, but to actually go for international investors, I think there's still quite a lot of work and education to be done.
Mm.
But it's happening, it's coming, so yeah.
Yeah. What would you say biggest advice based on all the work that you've done would be for anyone sort of going into this market?
You mean in terms of like developers wanting to, like,
Absolutely, yeah,
or
yeah.
investors?
Investors, maybe. We are investment event, so I'd imagine that there's going to be a few people
Mhm.
dialing in, looking to invest.
Yeah, I mean, I think branded residences are a great opportunity, aren't they, for investors to feel confident because they're backed and operated by a renowned brand, and with a new market that historically hasn't attracted a lot of international investment. I think that that will go a long way, and that's, I guess, why there's such a rise of branded residences projects coming up. And obviously, the sales premium does help as well, both from a developer point of view and an investor point of view as well.
Exactly. Perfect. Super, super interesting discussion. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Nina. And I look forward to seeing you at one of our events.
Thank you, Dario. I'll see you in Dubai and in Egypt as well.
Exactly. Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.